As we were told this morning, College Mennonite Church has adopted four congregational priorities. One, walking with God. Two, extending Jesus's love across generations and cultures. Three, building a church family rooted in Anabaptist values. And four, empowering one another for discipleship, service, and peace. The themes of family and culture go throughout this. And I think it was Carolyn Smith said she was reading this book, How to Know Another by David Brooks. And one chapter, he talks about how do your ancestors show up in your life? And we may have a, and Brooks quotes Edmund Burke once wrote that people will not look forward to posterity who never look back to their ancestors. Each person's consciousness is formed by all the choices of their ancestors, going back centuries, who they married, where they settled, whether they joined this church or that one. In other words, a person is part of a long movement, a transmission from one generation to another, and can only be seen rightly as part of that movement. Today, we have 6 Gundon Green family members who are 3rd, 4th, and 5th generation members of CMC. Tom, representing the 3rd generation, and his wife Julie. Laura Green, representing the 4th generation, and her husband Sam. And Laura and Sam's daughters, the 5th generation, Annalise and Amelia. They will share with us a brief history of how the Gundon family originally came to CMC and what it's like to be a multi-generational family at CMC. Tom and Laura told me that they were concerned that the family's opening remarks will not include the information you are looking for. I told them not to worry. If the soldiers want to know something, they will ask. So please welcome the Gundon Green family.
Well, we are flattered, honored, and humbled at your interest in our family. I think if I had my conversation with Mark over again, I wouldn't have told you that we were a 5th generation family, so we wouldn't have to be doing this, but it's okay. Following the birth of Annalise, our oldest granddaughter, the keeper of all relevant facts and history at CMC met me out here in the hallway soon after her birth. Do you all know who I'm talking about? Joe Springer. Yeah. He said, I suppose you understand and you realize that you are now a 5th generation family in this church. And I said, well, no. And then he didn't really even realize I was a 3rd. I never really thought about it very much. It wasn't something that we ever talked about or considered. It was just kind of what happens in life. You move along and things just happen, and it's not a thing you keep track of. At least I don't. So whether or not we note the generational number, we all in our family are truly mindful and grateful for the heritage and those who have gone before us, and for what this church has meant to us and our family. So our family is fortunate that we have had some people who have done some historical research of our family, past and present. And our great extended family has a family reunion every 3 years. And each time the people who are leading the reunion ask people to write a story or something about what they've done in the past few years or what's been going on in their lives so we can keep up with each other. And one year, when Ralph and Opal Gundon were in charge of the reunion, they asked each of the original 9 children to write their life story, or as much of it as they wanted to tell, in a couple, 3, 4 pages, whatever. And so that has been really, really good to look back and see what people, or what they thought about what was going on in their lives, or what their lives were like as younger people, because we didn't have any way of knowing that. And that generation didn't talk very much about what they had been like as children, or what their families were like. At least ours didn't, that we ever heard much of. So we've learned a lot from those little mini histories. And so a lot of the information I have that I'm going to give you today is from those stories, or else just stuff that I've heard over the years and been able to remember. So Jeff, if you hear me say something that's way out of line and way off, I know you've been involved in some of that, let me know. We'll fix it up. And Liz is back there too, so we'll straighten it out. And I did call some of my older cousins and talk to them a little bit and ask them what they remembered about some things that they would have been older than I was. And so I wouldn't have had any memories of those things. So I did get some information from them. My grandpa, C.J. Gundon, was born in 1882 in Johnson County, Iowa. His future wife, Agnes Albrecht, was born in 1888 in Metamora, Illinois, in a house just east of Metamora on State Road 116, where Julie's sister and her husband now live. So it's a Mennonite thing,
But she wasn't born.
No. Well, they here. Okay, they lived there. Okay, yeah. So very good. So CJ, Grandpa, heard Agnes read an essay at a Sunday school conference in Illinois sometime around 1909 or 1910. He didn't know her. He wasn't acquainted with her. But he heard her read this essay, and he was kind of taken with her. And at that time, he was already 27 years old. So he was, or 26 years old. So he was, been around a while. So he wrote her a letter. And here's what the letter said. Dear friend, you no doubt will be surprised to get a letter from me, especially a fellow who you've never met. I, of course, have seen you at different times, but never had the pleasure of getting acquainted with you personally. I just felt it my duty to drop you these few lines to see if you would care to correspond with me, not knowing a thing about circumstances with you. Possibly you have your company for the future. If so, please don't think hard of me for asking you for same. This has been a very busy, a very drizzly day here. Had some snow with rain, but melted as fast as it came down. Everything is about 2 weeks later than with you people. I'm going to Bible meeting if the weather is favorable this evening. Will not detain you any longer, hoping this will find you as it leaves us well and hearty and happy. Remember, as I remain awaiting an early reply, C.J. Gundon. Now, he was located up in Bay City, Michigan at that time, and she was in the Metamora area, so they were quite a bit north. So that's why the difference in the weather patterns. But kind of interesting. Did any of you men write a letter to your future wife, not having ever met her? But that's the kind of man sort of he was, I guess. So things worked out. They were married in September of 1911. They moved to a 160-acre farm near Gridley, Illinois, which is near Flanagan and Pontiac and all those towns, if you're familiar with that area, like some of you are, I know. And they got to work making babies. And here's the list of children that were born during that first time. Elva, 1912. Lois, 1915. Orville, 1917. Cleland, my dad, 1919. Helton, 1921. Ralph, 1923, Liz's dad. Don, 1925. Doris, 1927. And then they took a break. Um, the two oldest daughters, Elva and Lois, were getting old enough to think about going to a college or another school, and he wanted them to have an education. So he thought Goshen College would be the place for them to go. So on January 1st of 1930, they packed everything up and moved to Goshen. And they lived out east of the college here on what was called the college farm at that time. And then in September of 1930, number 9, Ruth, was born. So that completed the nine children. At that time, Grandpa was 48 and Grandma was 42. They had had 9 children in 18 years, 19 years, something like that.
So I can suggest that.
A little bit hard for me to imagine, but they lived in a college farm out here. They had a truck patch. They raised produce to sell. Said Grandpa sold ice cream and some other things like that. He was kind of an entrepreneur of different types during those days, I guess. The children all had fond memories of working in the truck patch, helping to grow vegetables and pick green beans and all those kind of things. So that was in all their stories, just about. He built a house then west of the church down here in the hospital parking lot in, I think it was 1932. And that house then was later moved across the road where Russ and Marge Lichty lived in it. And a couple other people since then, John and Kelly King, I guess. Grandpa was always interested in mission work and raising money for the church and for mission. Some of the stories and some of the things that they did during those years were, Grandpa liked to have guests come home for Sunday dinner, but they never knew who it was going to be till after church. So Grandma had to be ready for maybe 2 people or maybe 10 people. You know, he didn't know how many it would be. And one of the cousins mentioned, or somebody mentioned, that they had been told that always before they left for church, the house was to be cleaned up and ready to have company because didn't know who was going to be coming. One of the cousins told me that Grandpa occasionally, or not occasionally, every time, if one of the children missed a church meeting, this was even later on, or wasn't attending, they were reminded later that they missed the meeting. He didn't ask why, but he just told them he noticed that they weren't there. So he was in charge. As hard as it may seem to believe, I have no recognition of ever seeing my grandpa or grandma at church. Grandma contracted Parkinson's disease in the mid-1950s, and so she was in a wheelchair or else in bed. That's my only memories of Grandma, is seeing her in bed or in a wheelchair. And the other kind of odd thing is, hard to imagine too, that all the children who wrote their stories, there was only one of them that mentioned very much at all about College Church. And I mean, you can speculate or theorize all the reasons you want to why that would have been. And all I can think of is it was just so much a part of their life and just so natural. It's just what everybody did. You didn't think it was extraordinary that you needed to tell anybody about it. I mean, that's really all I can come up with. And I think that's kind of the way maybe we are too. It's just, you've been here your whole life and it's just been part of what you do or what you are. And you just don't really think that much about it being different or from where other people would be, at the same time. So it's kind of unusual, but that's my recollection. And my dad's the farm we're on was a farm Grandpa had bought. So he and Grandpa farmed together, or Dad farmed, and Grandpa would come down to the farm all the time. And my mother once said, she said, I can't believe you don't remember anything about Grandpa because he was there so much and all that around me. She said, I just, for whatever reason, it just didn't stick. And there's a lot of other weird stuff I remember, but that's not one of them. As children, there were many trips, as my siblings and myself, there were many trips made to Goshen on Sunday morning to come to church. And the question in the car was asked, why do we have to drive all the way to Goshen to go to church? There's 4 churches here in Milford we could go to. Why do we drive all the way to Goshen? And I must not have ever been given a very satisfactory answer because I don't remember what they said. So I'm sure Mother explained it well, but I don't recall what that explanation would have been. I guess that's really about all I got to say right now. If there's other questions others have to ask about other things, I'll be glad to try to answer those questions about the children or whatever. But I'm not going to try to tell you a whole bunch of stuff you don't want to hear. There's other stuff you want to talk about. So we'll go for that. So Laura, you can speak there. You don't have to come here. I just
I wasn't quite as prepared as my dad. I don't have anything written down. But I thought I'd just share, because I don't have, he shared the history, just a little bit about experience of going to church. Kind of what he said, this is just what we did. I don't remember College Mennonite Church being, I don't know that I would include that maybe in my story of my life, because it's just been such a part of it that I don't think about, I don't think about it being different because I've always been here. And when they said, well, what's it like going to church with your family? Was one of the questions Mark asked. And I was like, I don't know. I don't have anything to compare it to, because we always had family here. My grandparents were here. And I grew up my grandparents lived half a mile down the road, from us. And so they were just part of our family. Grandpa was farming with Dad, and so they were we were back and forth a lot. We'd ride our bikes down to Grandma and Grandpa's house. We saw him here at church. So it was just part of life. My Aunt Rose was here. She was pastoring. My cousins were here. It just didn't, I don't know. I didn't think anything of it because I thought that that's just kind of how life was. But I guess now that I've seen it with my own children, we live 2 miles from my parents, so we do a lot of back and forth as well too. Especially, when they were younger, Mom did a lot of babysitting, or she'd come over and help with stuff. We'd go over there to do things. And I guess something different was that we usually sat with my parents at church and the kids would play. Or Dad would teach them how to play tic-tac-toe, and they'd play games to keep them entertained during the church service. I will say, I don't very often remember sitting with my grandparents when we were at church, unless Mom and Dad were gone and we had come with Grandma and Grandpa. I remember Grandma being a Sunday school teacher in one of my Sunday school classes. And at that point, Sunday school classes were big enough that there were multiple table groups, and I was not allowed to be in my grandma's table group because she was my grandma. So they wanted me to experience someone different. I remember being really disappointed. But yeah, I think just being able to pass some of those traditions of faith down through the family has been really important for us. So, yes.
So, you got to make me. I mean, make it safe. So,
they'll ask.
You said that.
Yeah, I'll leave this there. Now it's time for questions. And I'll start with one. Annalise, you're going to college next year, a long ways away. So will you find a church locally, or will you come back here, or how do you think all this has affected you?
Okay, so this fall I'm heading down to the University of Evansville for college. I'm in a direct entry program for physical therapy, which means I'll be going to get my doctorate, and more likely than not, I'll be down there for about 6 to 7 years. Part of my reason to choose to go down there was just because I am someone that loves traveling and I want to go a lot of different places, and they have great programs for that. And so that's why I was kind of drawn down there. While I'm down there, I've already gotten into contact with a youth group It's called Delight, and it's a women's ministry, and they meet every Wednesday night. And so I'm planning to be involved in that. I've already talked to a bunch of the members, and they're all super sweet. As for church, I'm hoping to find something. I'm sure a lot of the girls from Delight do go to churches down there, so I want to take time to visit around at different churches and see which one I fit into most. But I do really want to get involved. I really love the chance to interact with kids and do stuff with Sunday school. I love doing that here, and so I'm hoping that I'll get the chance to do that while I'm in college too. So, yeah.
I have a more practical question. How do 9 children and 2 parents get to church? And do they have a bus from the RV industry, or how does that go?
I wasn't there, so I don't know.
And there are no stories.
Well, once they were here, the older girls would have been at college, but I think a lot of them, they all lived at home there together. Well, they'd have been real close here for that walk, I suppose, or take the horse and buggy. I don't know. But in Illinois, I have no idea what they did out there. I mean, or how far. Well, they attended Waldo Church. You know where Waldo is. It's not too far from Gridley. So, but even so, you'd still have to be in a car or something to get there. So I don't know.
And another question, how many cousins are there?
That's 20 some.
I think 20 or 28 maybe. I started.
Yeah. It's first cousins, yes, 28. The next generation, I don't know how many. I think it's in the probably close to 50, maybe something like that.
Yeah. Well,
There aren't any like 8 children in one family in the next generations. So
I'm Vera Schmucker. I'm interested in knowing how old your parents were when they passed, because I think I remember your grandpa at least. We've been here 60 years, so I shouldn't I? Do you know how long it's been?
yeah, well, my grandpa Gundon died in 1961. Grandma Gundon died in 1963.
Yeah.
My dad died in 2004. And my mother died in 2016.
Thank you. Lois Miller here. We had the privilege of being in a small group with Doris and Cheryl Metzler. And I remember one time Doris said that she remembers her father in 2 different ways. He was a farmer, and then when they moved to Goshen, it was like he was a different person because he was not out in the fields, and they didn't have a chance to run the fields. But he was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman.
Yeah, he bought a truck, and he hauled fruits and vegetables and grain and all kinds of products like that. Dad talked a lot of different times about how he would go to Michigan somewhere and get a load of cherries, and then he'd bring them back here, and the kids would all help bag them up or whatever to resell and different things like that. And they go to Florida and buy Georgia and buy pecans and bring them back Georgia to Florida and buy grapefruit, oranges, or whatever. And he just drove all around and did all kinds of stuff. But the one story that I like the best about him is my Uncle Don told me the story. And Uncle Don, of course, was a salesman in the family, if you know Don. And I said, I asked him with him. I said, well, so how did Grandpa do this? How did it work when he was hauling fruit around? How did he decide where to sell it, and what would he do? And Dad said, well, let me give you an example. And these are just numbers I'm making up now. These aren't actual numbers, but he said he'd have a load of apples and we'd be going out to Illinois somewhere and he'd see a fruit stand along the road and he wouldn't see any apples there. So he'd stop and ask the guy, say, could I interest you in a couple bushels of apples to sell? And the guy, oh no, there's no market for apples around here. Nobody wants apples. We don't use them. And he'd say, okay, well, just let me leave these here. He said, I'll stop on the way back. And if you don't sell them, I'll pick them up or you can pay me, if you sell them. So he'd go and get rid of the apples and have a load of grain or whatever coming back. And they'd stop and he'd come in and he'd ask the guy, well, how'd it go? Were you able to sell apples? The guy says, say, could you bring me 10 more bushels next week? So that was kind of how he did things, just, he must have been fairly successful at it because he seemed to have money. So, sure.
Hi, this is Liz. I'm Ralph's daughter, and Tom kind of sparked a remembrance for me of some information that Doris shared with me when I visited her some time ago. And I also don't have a lot of memory of Grandpa. I do sort of Grandma, but also going to visit her as a young child because we lived pretty close to them too. And she was often in her bed because she had Parkinson's. But one thing Doris told me that I hadn't heard before is that when she was diagnosed, and Tom, I think you identified the date, there wasn't a lot of information about Parkinson's, and I don't know how much it was a part of chronic illnesses at that time. But anyway, Grandpa did whatever he could to try to find a cure for her, and even went out as far as California, where he had apparently heard that they might be able to help. But unfortunately, at that time, they didn't have all the medications that we have now. So that's kind of how I remember her. I remember my mom, we would pick little pansies and put them in a little vase and take it over as a child. But it was hard for us. We didn't really understand. We'd see her tremors and she couldn't really talk to us very well. So that's pretty much my memory of her. I didn't get to see the intelligent, capable person she was in so many ways.
From a farming family, all these generations ago, I'm interested in how many of your cousins, for example, in your generation might still be farmers. And if you've thought about, will there be a fifth generation of farmers in the family? That's a wide open. But I'm interested in if you have any cousins that are still in farming, or if you're the only one, or grandchildren, or whatever, or if you're the only one.
I don't have any cousins that have ever been or ever will be involved in farming. So I'm the only one in my generation that had anything to do with agriculture. Our Sam and I right now are working on a transition plan, so he's going to be taking over what I do at some point in time before long. Mm-hmm. But well, Amelia might want to be a farmer. I don't know. Maybe she and Sam can work that one out. But yeah, it'll be Sam's I don't know if it'll be a problem, but it'll be his project. How's that? Yeah. Well, my grandpa had a farm in Illinois, a 160-acre farm there near Gridley, and he held on to that for quite a while after they came to Goshen. And then once he got to Goshen here, eventually he bought 3 more farms in this area. The one at Milford, one just straight out west of New Paris, and then the one up on Basher Road. And so when he died, my dad bought the one at Milford, and then they sold the other 2 up here. So I don't know, is that anything other than that? I don't,
Art Smoker, talk about members of the family who taught or worked at Goshen College. and any stories you remember about that.
Okay, well, Aunt Lois taught here at Goshen College, I think French, maybe Spanish. I'm not sure. French. Lois Clemens. I said Lois. Aunt Lois Clemens, married to Ernest. See, I don't know if any Liz did. Carl Metzler taught here, didn't he, at the college? So math. Yeah. Okay. So that would be a son-in-law.
Ralph was businessman.
Ralph was business manager. Yeah, business manager for how many years, Liz, do you think? Okay. Yeah.
The majority of his career.
Mm-hmm. So there'd been three. That would have been three. Well, yes, Ruth. Yeah. Since the gym's named after, I guess we shouldn't forget her, should we? Yeah. So almost half of them had some kind of a connection at Goshen College. And I don't. Most of you know the story of Lois and her award she got from the Jewish folks. So don't know that. Oh, okay. Well, Aunt Lois volunteered for MCC work in 1941 and went to France to work in a children's home for Jewish children whose parents had been taken or whatever happened to them. And eventually she was taken prisoner by the Nazis, or taken into, she wasn't, it was, I guess you call it prisoner, but she was taken to a place in Germany where they lived in like a hotel kind of place, but she wasn't allowed. We don't know very much about what she was allowed to do, actually, but she was released, I think, in 1943 or 44, then came back to the United States. Well, yeah, I'm getting to that. So far on down the line here, and sometime in probably in the early 2000s, Mary Jean and Liz and got involved with, just Mary Jean, just Mary, her sister Mary, and found out about this organization called Yad Vashem of Israel. And there was conversation between some people, and they found out that Lois had worked at this children's home and had helped to save Jewish children's lives by basically lying to the Germans when they came looking for the children. And so then she was nominated to be awarded Righteous Among the Nations, which is an award that's given only to non-Jewish people who have saved Jewish lives. And so her name and whatever is on a plaque in France somewhere for that award. And that was an award France. I'm sorry. Well, okay, Israel. Yeah. Yeah, that would be the logical place. But yeah. Yes, that's right. It's in Israel. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see what I'm going to say. Oh, well, that she was presented the award in Washington, D.C., and we were privileged to be able to go to that. And Barack Obama was the one who awarded her awarded the plaque to her memory posthumously. So that was kind of neat.
Tell stories from that?
Nope. She didn't talk about it. I don't think the family knew very much about what had gone on either. It was just, again, that was a generational, but is that family thing? They just didn't talk about stuff like that. So,
Very upset children who have been saved
from their families, That's kind of discombobulated. Sorry.
Our family's claim to fame is that we were the second family to live in the Gundon house, and we're the ones that moved it across the street. But during that time, there must have been at least 2 family reunions in Goshen, and we always had an open house for the family. So Russ and I heard lots and lots of stories about what went on in that house. So
Yeah.
if you want to know more, maybe I know something you don't know. I remember I asked when they were telling about when they, on Sunday mornings, they had the house ready for Sunday noon visitors, but also they had lots of guests. And I said, well, where did they sleep? Well, the boys had to go to the attic, and they had mats up there so that they could all stay in the attic so the guests could have a bedroom. Yeah.
See, you know more than I do about what happened there, huh? Yeah.
Actually, one of the counselor at Parkside Elementary, where I work, actually lives in the house now. Suzanne and Sunday Mahaja live in that house, and so I've given her a little bit of like the little history that I have heard about the house I have passed on, and so it's been neat to go back, and I had their son last year in kindergarten, and so asked him some things. I said, "Oh, have you hidden in the little closet at the end, at the bottom of the stairs where the kids used to hide?" And she told me that they have locked that, and the kids are not allowed to go in there anymore. So, yeah, yes.
I'm Fanny Berkey. When Wilbur and I came to Goshen in '64, we lived in what was called the Yellow House or the Farm Cottage. Do you know anything about that, Tom? Was it part of the Gundon farm? We lived in what we called the Yellow House. It was right beside High Park. Some people called it the Farm Cottage. Was that part of the Gundon farm? Oh, okay.
But the barn, it's where Almonds lived down on
Well,
where it moved it from the original spot and used it for a home. Yeah.
Did you all hear that? The barn from the Gundon farm was moved down toward the dam by Altus Rock. Yeah. So the red house, yeah. But I have another question. I'm sorry, I cannot remember your mother's name, Tom, and I want to know.
Myra. Sorry.
Of course.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one other thing about the Gundons. We came back in 1970, and we had 2 children in a car and some old furniture. And Wilbur was starting to teach at the college, and we had no money, but Ralph co-signed for us to buy a house as business manager of Goshen College.
Yeah, the land down here where you're talking about where that barn was, that was all farmland in the 20s and 30s before all the houses and stuff went out there. Because Dad talked about pasturing animals and whatever down in there. So,
other stories that I heard were when the house was built, there were lots of Goshen College students that helped that project. Atlee Beachy would tell about what he did, what windows he put in. Carl Masonary and his dad painted the rooms, and the living room had stencils around the top. And I know Carl came and copied those before we covered them up. But, and I don't know, I can't remember who all, but there were lots of Goshen College students that helped build that house. Yeah.
no, thanks. I didn't know that.
There's a branch here at the window. The window appreciates all the sweet corn that Tom brings. I wonder how many years you've been doing that, bringing produce to the window.
I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7. I don't know. It hasn't been real long. But
And typically, how many dozen would you bring in one season? It's a lot, folks. Big bags full.
I don't know, maybe 100 or 150. Some years I have more, some years we don't have as much. So, but it's been about that much.
So it's much appreciated.
Yep.
Oh.
Barb Smucker.
And I remember Elva in our kitchen, and most of us have fond memories of helping her in there and of how it's it's evolved or broken up since then.
Yeah, I think they called her the church hostess, but she never got anything out of that other than the satisfaction of making a lot of food.
I'm Phyllis Yoder, and I grew up here from sixth grade to through college. And the Gundens, he brought back from Michigan periodically truckloads of produce because we always got produce of some kind or another, and canned peaches, I just a lot of things like that, and we're somehow related. My mother was from Illinois, yeah, from Metamora area,
Okay.
and we're somehow related. And I have always known this, but I don't know exactly how.
I'd have to say a word or two about Ruth Gunman, whose career at Goshen College was primarily focused on physical education, and she was one that helped to lead Goshen's transition from not being in inter varsity sports with other colleges to finally having that permission to do that, I think under the Miller administration. But she also made a major contribution to our international education program. When the Chinese started coming in the early 80s, due to Lawrence Burkholder's pioneering work there and friendships from his earlier work in China, there was a huge cultural difference between the folks coming from China. They had a minder that made sure that they would behave themselves, and they only walked around the campus in groups. So when they came, it fell to Ruth to introduce them a little bit to how you live and work and behave in America. I remember her saying when we would get a big tub of Kentucky Fried Chicken that we don't eat noisy. Some of them were used to just having a piece of chicken, throwing it back over their shoulder or whatever. So there were some differences that she tried to gently, lead them into. And they respected her, and she helped to ease their transition. And the program succeeded often because of some little things, and she was very good at little things.
Yeah, I don't know how many groups she brought down to the farm. You didn't know if they understood what you were talking to them about or not exactly, but they would shake their heads, yeah, so I guess they understood. And then she also, several different times we had a family gathering down at the college cabin. She would get as many of the family together as she could for a dinner with them. So, that's right. Yeah, they would cook their food, and we were to eat their food, I guess. So,
My name is Shar Clymer, and Ruth and I were good friends when I was in college here. And she invited me down to her house for dinner sometimes. And one day she said, I want you to come for a Chinese meal. I have these friends that are going to prepare it for us. So Jim and I went down for dinner, and I have never seen a kitchen so full of clutter and splashes. And I mean, it took us hours to clean up after that meal, but she was very gracious and just loved those people.
Excuse me.
This is Art again. Talk a little about Orville, who was a builder. I know that my brother Bob worked for him for a while, and I think he and Kathy bought a mobile home that down near the river that he owned, which they still live in today.
that Orville owned, that Okay, I'm not familiar with that whole place. Yeah, he had a construction business here in Goshen, and my dad worked for him on and off quite a bit, and that was my first jobs that I ever got paid for, other than on the farm working for Orville. So, and then when he sold the business to Tom Kaufman, and it became Creative Construction, and I think that's probably who Bob. I think Bob probably worked for Creative Construction because I remember your brother. Yeah, and Orville, his wife Ann had arthritis pretty bad, and she would have really liked to gone and live in Arizona at some point in time. And I think I was told later that he just couldn't leave, and he felt really bad that he couldn't make life more comfortable for him, but he just couldn't leave Goshen for an extended period of time. So I would go to Florida for a couple months in the wintertime, but Arizona would have been a little bit bigger move, I guess. So he did a lot of work for people in the church. I know that.
Well, the other thing that should be noted about Orville, he was the builder for the 5-unit condominium on Oak Leaf Lane. And we learned a little about that when we lived there in the condominiums a little further south than the 5-unit building. But we were told that that is the first condominium in Elkhart County. And at the time when they proposed doing this, that they'd live together in this 5-unit condominium, people shook their heads and said, that'll never work. And now when I think of all the condominiums in the area, it's really ironic.
Yeah, they had quite a time with that condominium. It was, all the particulars of the building guidelines and stuff were different from a house. You had to have firewalls and all kinds of stuff like that, and people couldn't understand why do we need a firewall between, you know. But they did a lot of work with architects to get that finally approved, I think. So yeah.
Just bringing another thing up about Elva is I just really appreciated her and her knowledge of cooking. And I still use the College Mennonite cookbook that she was a part of. And there are a lot of good recipes there yet.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Lordy.
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
I won't.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Don't forget that Ralph became the president of the First National Bank in Goshen.
Maybe everyone is aware that the area on the other side of the lake of the pond, of the dam area, was Orville and their farm for a long time, and then that has all become the orchard area now.
Well, while the Gundens are thinking of their final comments, I'll only make one observation. We were in a church where they had this woman that did everything. You know, she cooked for people, she visited people, she would bring people to church, everything. And somebody asked her, why do you do that? And she said, well, that was the way I was raised, and I know no different. And I think that's also. So if you want to make your final comments, any one of you, and then we'll be adjourned.
But I want to make a comment. Thank you for being here. I know you're missing the youth group, and I really appreciated when we moved here. We saw you take part in worship service sometimes, and Julie was College Mennonite women. So I've always been impressed with the Gundon family, and I feel bad that we haven't let Sam talk. But we know you're we know you're the father of the daughter, then maybe you can get her into agriculture. I know she had a lot of things at the 4-H fair last year. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jack. So,
Oh yeah, I don't really have anything other than thank you for your kind words and your support of our family over the years, and we've enjoyed our church here, and you know, like I said, it's been part of our life forever, and you just don't really think of any other way of doing things. We've got, you know, many really good friends, and just like all you folks, many people I went to college with and lived with in the dorms and all that stuff come here, and so we've been friends for a really long time, and we appreciate the guidance that we've gotten from people here who are older than we are, and some who are younger than we are have good guidance as well. So I'm not making light of that, but thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.
thank you.